Chag Sameach. So, what a powerful day. Just even before I begin, I just want to share something that occurred to me as we were circling our sanctuary, led by young Shira carrying her stuffed Torah, which was such an amazing experience. And this is really my first Simchat Torah as Rabbi of Adat Shalom in a way, because last year was so different and still so powerfully impacted by it all. And over the past year, I was reflecting on this and how the way that I follow the news has changed. Perhaps some of you can relate to this, following the news in a different way over the past year. The last time before this war started that the way I followed the news changed was actually in 2016. There was a presidential election that was pretty consequential, if many of us remember, and I was actually abroad in Israel in my year of study abroad, and going through this big change for our country really changed the way I followed the news then. And now a new podcast that I started following over the past year, the Times of Israel Daily Briefing podcast. I think many of you also follow it, not as an exclusive source of news, but as one. And since Hirsch Goldberg Poland's body was found, along with the bodies of Carmel Gat, Edin Yerushalmi, Alexander Lobanov, Almog Sarusi, and Ori Danino, it's become the first source of news that I look at every single day, even though it's been a gradual shift that I've been following it more and more over the past year. And so just before our Yom Tov started, the journalist of that podcast interviewed a rabbi from the IDF, Rabbi Avi Pupko, about our Simchat Torah holiday this year. And so I was like, okay, this will be interesting. I listened to the interview, and I found that on several different points, Rabbi Pupko and I had been teaching the same things and share some of the same views, which I really didn't expect to have so much in common with a rabbi from the IDF. Who would have thought that I have something in common with someone from the Israeli Rabbanut? But, surprises are great, and we love this. So I wanted to learn together and reflect on some of this this morning. So the first point, I was explaining to my religious school students just this past Sunday that the holiday of Simchat Torah originated outside Israel, which is something that the students didn't necessarily know. So in Israel, or from our 5 books of Moses, our Torah, what we learn about the holiday is not that it's called Simchat Torah, it's called Shmini Atzeret. We celebrated that yesterday here, but so it's the 8th day holiday. So after the 7 days of Sukkot, we have one day that's a holiday of ingathering, a holiday of staying a little bit longer. It's a little bit somber because the center of this holiday from the Torah is a prayer for rain. And in the land of Israel, having rain versus not having rain is a very big deal. It's kind of a matter of life and death, really, because without rain, you don't have crops. Without crops, you don't have food. We need the rainy season. And so this is also this holiday to say goodbye to holidays, and that's part of the somber nature of it. But also this prayer for rain is the central piece of that, that consequence of our prayers make a powerful and palpable difference. Now, outside Israel, as we know, we have 2 days of Yom Tov, originating with our ancient customs of telling time and calendaring. And when we left the land of Israel, our practice of making sacrifices in the Holy Temple transitioned over to a practice of prayer, tefillah, and study, reading the Torah. And so over time, this is actually historically pretty complicated. Didn't have that much time to do research on it this week, but it's something very interesting to explore. Over time, Shmini Atzeret, that holiday, came to be associated with restarting the cycle of Torah reading. And so going from the beginning to the end, saying, okay, we reached the end of the Torah, there's Moses reaching the end of his life, but then also we read the story of creation of the world. This is something that is very, very joyous. So Simchat Torah originated outside Israel. This is something that Rabbi Pupko was mentioning on the podcast and something I was recently teaching to my religious school students. So another thing I was speaking with my religious school students about, which came as a surprise to me when I was on my year of study abroad, and I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, the holiday of Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah is a very different experience outside Israel versus inside Israel. And this was true even before last year. So outside Israel, the somber comes first and is followed by joy. So most simply we say Yizkor on Shmini Atzeret, we dance with the Torah and Simchat Torah. The sorrow and the joy are coming one day after the other, but they feel a little bit more separate. Now in Israel, the somber and the joyous are smushed together. So inside Israel, in the evening, there's Hakafot, and people go home for dinner. And in the morning, they come to shul, they say Yizkor, and then they dance. And so it's this feeling that is a little bit, it's the journalist in the podcast described it as ambivalent. And I was like, that's not quite the word that I would choose, because to me, ambivalent means, oh, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. But if ambivalent means two different things at the same time that could almost cancel each other out, I would say that would be a great way to describe it. Another thing that we were talking about, some of us were talking about yesterday in the Sukkah, that outside Israel on Shmini Atzeret, we're in the Sukkah, and in Simchat Torah, we're not in the Sukkah. And I did a little preliminary research to be confirmed once we can do more research after the holiday. But inside Israel, on Shmini Atzeret, people are not in the Sukkah. So that day of Hoshana Rabbah is really the last day of Sukkot. So the holiday of Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah is a very different experience outside Israel versus inside Israel. Outside Israel, we have the 2 days of Yom Tov, and so these two different experiences feel separate. And inside Israel, they're kind of smushed together, which makes it a really different emotional situation. Now, this third thing that Rabbi Pupko and I agreed upon very profoundly, it was something that struck me because it was something that came up for me last year that I felt very, very strongly about. And it's that Jewish holidays must remain strong even in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Our holidays must remain strong even in the face of unspeakable tragedy. And so this is how it came up in the podcast interview. The journalist who was interviewing was saying, okay, the most tragic situation in living memory is the Holocaust. And are there any rituals that were instituted after the Holocaust that permanently changed the practice of prayer? And so the answer is yes and no. Of course, it's a great rabbinic answer. And this is what Rabbi Pupko says. We've always understood as Jews that just kind of the way we do things is that we keep on doing our holidays. We keep on going to synagogue, we keep on doing our rituals and celebrating our identity, kind of no matter what. But not that we ignore what's going on outside of us, but we put our head down and we keep going forward. We don't stop this cycle of Jewish life that we've been on for millennia. And then he talked a little bit about growing up in Canada and observing Sukkot. And in Canada, it's a lot colder than it is in Los Angeles, especially at the time of Sukkot, and how in his family, people slept in the sukkah anyway, even though it was cold, because that's just what you do. And so he continued and said, one of our greatest strengths as a Jewish people is exactly that we put our head down and we keep on doing what we've always done, because that's the source of our strength. As far as how events and tragic events in our past have shaped our liturgy and our customs, absolutely. He went into a lot of detail, especially about a particular prayer that is in the Orthodox tradition in memory of those who died in the Crusades. And so we're not going to go into all those details right now, but something that I feel like, at least for me, hit a lot closer to home. He was saying that he was just having a conversation with one of his fellow soldiers sitting in the sukkah and talking about how holidays were celebrated after the Holocaust or during the Holocaust. And he said, we grew up on these stories of Jews continuing to celebrate as much as they could the holidays, the Seder night, telling stories about Jewish women in Auschwitz lighting Hanukkah candles. And Rabbi Pupko continues and says, this may sound a little strange, but I said to my fellow soldier, I have no doubt that when those Jewish women lit the Hanukkah candles in Birkenau, they were of course aware of everything that was going on. I'm sure they lit the candles with tears and a broken heart that we can't even imagine. And yet, at the same time, they lit the Hanukkah candles the exact same way that they lit the Hanukkah candles the year before, or 5 years before, the way that their mothers and grandmothers lit the Hanukkah candles. And that in and of itself is a very powerful statement of strength, courage, and resilience. And so as we observe Simchat Torah, we have to remember what happened. We have to incorporate the memory of what happened. But we also have to make sure that we're celebrating Simchat Torah because that's what we do. Every year we finish the 5 books of Moses, we're happy, we dance, and we start it again. And I remember very strongly last year, I was hearing from people in the community, but Rabbi so-and-so is canceling Simchat Torah. How can we have Simchat Torah? But I felt then, a year ago, exactly what Rabbi Pupko is saying now. If we can't celebrate, if we're physically unable to celebrate, God forbid, that's one thing. I was speaking yesterday, sharing a teaching from Rabbi Yosef Baruch Fromer from Kehilat Magen Avraham and Omer, a half an hour away from Sderot. They could not celebrate last year. They were not able to complete the Torah reading because they had to defend themselves in their community. But if we can, we must. We, the Jewish people, we've been saying this all year. We are Am Echad Im Lev Echad, one people with one heart. Because we know that our hearts can be broken, truly broken, about something that didn't happen specifically to us here in this community. And so I feel that all of us must believe that our hearts can heal their hearts over there, that their hearts can be truly healed by our observance, by our dancing, by something over here that isn't happening over there. Because this is the power of ritual, this is the power of tefillah, and this is the power of unity. I wish more than anything we were already at a time of only healing, and we aren't quite there yet. So, may our celebration today renew us to continue our journey together toward our Jewish future and toward better times. Chag Sameach.